All right, so this rule here is mostly for the people that want to make a composition that doesn't necessarily have their focal point on the sides here, right? On the thirds of your composition. This rule actually allows you to create a composition where the middle, the center of your composition, is actually the focal point. So we're gonna work on that now. I want you to pay attention here. We still have these lines that split the composition into thirds. Yes, we still have these intersecting points from the rule of thirds, but notice that these more diagonal lines here that create this like center intersection also create these points here, right? So these points of intersection are other areas in your composition that are symmetrically like opposite from each other. And if you use these points here equally, then you'll create balance between your elements in your composition. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this rule is really good for people that want to have the focal point of your image be the center. So we're going to start with the first shape and put that right in the center, starting with a cylinder again. And it's going to be right smack dab in the middle of our composition. Parallel sides, and then our elliptical bottom. Okay, and there is our first shape. It's going to be our focal point, right? So now we have to think about how we're going to balance the entire composition, right? But first step is going to be adding the next shape. So I'm going to use this point here as the placement for my rectangular prism. I'm going to be drawing a small rectangular prism here. So start with the central Y. And I want my rectangular prism to be in front of the cylinder. So I'm going to have the bottom of my rectangular prism below the cylinder here, right? Or else it's going to look like it's floating. So central Y, and then parallel lines for A, parallel line for A, B, B, and then C right here. Okay, messed up a little there. C, and then C. Okay. So there is my rectangular prism, and go ahead and erase any part of the cylinder that should be covered by the rectangular prism. And then now if you look at the composition, right, it's very heavily weighted on this side. So each element of your composition is going to have a visual weight. That visual weight is going to pull the audience's view to different parts of your composition, and you want them to look all over your composition and not just in one specific spot. So our focal point went from here to now here, right, where these 2 points are kind of merging, right? You notice that you're really not even paying attention to this part of the drawing anymore. You're just looking here, right? And you're probably thinking, of course I'm not paying attention to anything here. There's nothing here, right? And that's the point. So we're gonna go into our next shape. I still have my sphere, and I know that I'm gonna be putting it right here, right? I'm gonna have 2 small shapes on this side and 1 large shape on this side. And that is, again, to address the visual weight. A small shape is gonna have less visual weight than a larger shape, right? Which is why you're really still looking at this cylinder. So if I have 2 small shapes next to each other, they will kind of equalize with the larger shape. But since we already have 1 shape here, we need to add another shape here, right? So here we have this intersection, and here we're going to go with the next intersection. This cone is gonna sit behind the cylinder, right? So the base of my cone is gonna be here, and then I'm gonna have the top of my cone be taller than the top of the cylinder. Okay, because it's just one shape, the size of this shape is gonna need a lot of visual weight. So I'm increasing the size. I'm gonna draw the straight line there and connect the intersecting sides to that top ellipse, or in this case it's a dot. All right, there's our straight line. And then I'm gonna erase parts of the cone that should be covered by the cylinder. I'm also gonna erase the guidelines that I drew because we don't need those anymore. And now, as you can see, by using both this part and this part, or sorry, this intersection and this intersection, I've created more visual weight on this side. Right now, my image is heavier in this direction, right? And notice that like we are no longer really paying attention to this cube or this rectangular prism as much as we are these two shapes here now, right? And if you don't see it yet, that's okay. It'll take practice, and it also takes you like stopping for a second to really just like figure out what did I just focus on. And most likely it's around here. So to balance that out, I'm going to use this or this intersecting point, right? You can choose whichever, but since I'm doing a small sphere, I'm going to be using this point. It's not going to be perfectly balanced because that would mean I'd have to have used this point here, right? But it'll be enough to pull our attention back in this direction as well, right? If I wanted to, I could add a cone that would sit up to this point, and that would balance out as well. But in this case, I have to draw a sphere. So I will be adding the sphere above the rectangular prism here. I want my sphere to be sitting on top of the rectangular prism. So I'm going to make sure the bottom of it is touching the top of the rectangular prism. Measure the radii. And there's the first part. Let's copy that over. Okay, it's a little off there. Let's fix that. Second quarter. And then let's copy this over. And there is our fourth quarter. And there we have our sphere. We're gonna erase all of the guidelines as well as the parts of the rectangular prism that should be covered by the sphere. And there we have a balanced composition where we now have a near equal amount of weight on both sides, which then leaves the focal point back to the center of the overall drawing. And that's how you use the balance method.